Welcome to OncoPharm. I'm your host, John Bazar. I'm a professor of pharmacy practice at ETSU's Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy, and today we're continuing our mini-series on pathways to becoming an oncology pharmacist, and I'm pleased to be joined by two new friends, Vineetha Thomas, who's clinical oncology pharmacist at Texas Oncology, and Sheila Pierre, who is lead oncology pharmacist at Mount Sinai Medical Center. Vineetha, Sheila, thank you for joining me.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so
having
much,
me.
John.
Vineetha, let's start with you. Kind of tell me your superhero origin story of where you started and how you ended up in your current position.
First of all, John, thank you so much for having me here. So I started my career after I got my pharmacist license. I started as an inpatient pharmacist at one of our hospitals here in Oklahoma City. And I worked as an inpatient staff pharmacist for about 4 to 5 years. And up till that point, I didn't have any oncology experience or any, training in oncology. But I noticed this job opening come up at our cancer center in Oklahoma City, and I found that really interesting. I really wanted to explore and see if, that would be something I like because up until that point, like I said, I was a little fearful of working in oncology pharmacy because I knew if you make a medication error, that would be really bad. So, always had these doubts. But when I saw that job opening as an infusion pharmacist, I decided to just go forward with it. And I went ahead and applied, and I got that job as an infusion pharmacist. And I worked at our cancer center as an infusion pharmacist for about 3.5 to 4 years. And at that point, when my supervisor was doing my one-on-one for my yearly evaluation, she said I'm doing a great job, and she really encouraged me to sort of start pursuing a role as a clinical pharmacist. And so, I mean, I was not board certified in oncology pharmacy at that point, and I told her, like all the other, my colleagues, clinical pharmacists are oncology board certified. And she said, as long as I keep working towards that goal, she's okay with that. And since she showed a lot of, kindness, and she was super gracious to give me that opportunity, I wanted to like go ahead and jump at that opportunity because I knew I wouldn't get that anywhere else. So right about that point, my colleagues also started sort of encouraging me to go into that clinical pharmacy role. So I sort of took all of that as a yes, I should move forward with this. And so there was an opening at our GU clinic at that point for a clinical pharmacist. So I went ahead and started there. And for about 4 to 4.5 years, I worked as a clinical pharmacist in our GU oncology clinic. And I started to feel like I, forgot everything outside of GU at that
Mhm.
point, about 4 years into GU, because I got my board certification about 2022. December was when I got board certified, and I studied everything for it. But then um, came this opportunity at Texas Oncology where, I'd be counseling patients with all kinds of cancers. So I was like, okay, this is the perfect opportunity for me to just jump in and, start refreshing my knowledge on all things cancer. So I went ahead with that job.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I loved hearing your story. I've got some follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Every 4 years or so, you've been making it seems like. But my guess is maybe I have some similar questions for both you and Sheila. So, Sheila, why don't you tell us your start and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I started off as a generalist, general hospital pharmacist, and my reasons for delving into oncology were twofold. Primarily, I was tired of the schedule. With hospital, you're compelled to work weekends, evenings, holidays. You're standing there waiting for this schedule to come out, and then everybody's bartering. I'll take this Saturday if you take that. God forbid you're working in front of someone who's known to call out sick. You might be compelled to work evening or graveyard. I didn't want to be in this position anymore. So that was my primary motivation for doing it. With General Hospital, you rotated through the oncology suite. So all staff pharmacists had to do 1 week every 6. And I enjoyed my chemo rotations there. And so I figured maybe this would be an avenue for me. And I knew that they did banker hours. So that was also that was appealing. So I figured that that might be an avenue to get out of being at the mercy of this calendar every month. But also, I kind of began to feel like a cog in a wheel in General Hospital. I felt safer than in retail for sure, but I just felt like I wasn't really making a difference. I wasn't fulfilled. If I disappeared, I wasn't the type to do that. But if someone disappeared for a couple of hours, nobody noticed. If you weren't around for a couple of weeks, it didn't really make a difference. And I could have coasted that way until retirement, but I needed more. And so because I had some oncology background and I wanted this schedule, I decided to put myself out there. And Headhunter reached out to me and she said, well, with your experience, we can get you in the door. And so I went and I interviewed, and I guess the director, Les Mahler, liked me. He took me on. And yeah, and that's how I started. What I wasn't prepared for was how much I would love it. I knew I was going to be happy with my schedule, but I didn't realize how much I would love it, that these lettered people, doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, they came to me for guidance and for knowledge. And that just gave me a sense of purpose and fulfillment. And also on top of that, it was kind of heady and also humbling that we're dealing with people who we're all mortal, right? But we're dealing with people who have basically been told what their expiration date is, and they're trusting you with their care. They're trusting you that you will choose the best treatment to give them the longest time here and the best time of what they have remaining. So because of that, I decided I want to excel in this practice. And so that's when I decided to go forward with board certification.
Okay. So, Vineetha, well, Sheila, if I had to pick out an episode title, it'd be Oncology Pharmacy Fulfillment and a Great Schedule. Vineetha, when that you mentioned you were working as an inpatient pharmacist too, like Sheila, and this
Right.
position open in the infusion center sounded
Mhm.
like. How much of that of a schedule that wasn't where you would have to worry about working Christmas Day or New Year's Day or any of these major holidays, how much did that play into your pursuit as well?
It definitely played into, that was definitely one of the factors when I looked into the infusion pharmacist job. But for me, it was just a curiosity too, because I was, so this is something just about me. When I started my inpatient training, I was trained in every other area other than oncology. I feel
Mm.
like I went through infectious diseases. I spent my time there when the ID clinical pharmacist took off. I covered, the ID shift. I did a whole lot of critical care. I rotated through the surgery pharmacy, the ICU pharmacy. I did spend some time with our NICU pharmacist. I kind of got the feel for all the areas. And somehow the oncology training just didn't happen. I don't know why or how, but so I kind of wanted to get the feel for it. And I wanted to see, like, since I did not have a residency, I did not know what exactly I love most and where would I end up for the rest of my life. So for that reason, when this position opened up, I was like, this is my perfect chance to learn, on the job because they trained me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was more of a curiosity, and I wanted to explore what oncology would be like.
Yeah. So, some of the people that have listened to my podcast and reached out to me have said, like, I never saw myself in a career in oncology pharmacy. I just kind of ended up here. Like there was a position open
Right.
and they couldn't fill it, and I didn't mind it, so they hired me. So let's say you have someone who's similar to that is, but they want to do this, right? They want to be an oncology pharmacist. They didn't do the residency path. They've been working as a pharmacist, and they apply for a job in an infusion center. What are the things that they should be ready to say on an interview or to have done to be prepared for this? What do you think, Sheila?
I think first and foremost, if they have any kind of experience at all in oncology, I think that would be a plus. Most people coming, retail, maybe not so much, but most people coming out of hospital at least had some exposure to oncology. I think it might be a little more challenging if you're coming from retail, but I would definitely say having some experience, and if you have any mentors or someone who's willing to vouch for you, uh, I think that would also go a long way in maybe getting your foot in the door, because it's not the same as when I started back then. I mean, just having a little bit of experience was enough, but now there are PGY1s, PGY2s, so it's a little more competitive, but it can be done.
Yeah. Vineeta, what would you say?
So for me, personally, I think my hospital pharmacist experience definitely helped me get the role. At least that's what my, manager. She was excited to see an applicant who had some IV infusion experience. So we had at the hospital that I was a staff pharmacist, we had a outpatient infusion. So, I was experienced in general IV, compounding, verification of IV medication orders. So that definitely, I think, played a role in getting the job.
Okay. Um, so let's transition to talk about board certification. So you both mentioned, you know, going and getting your B Cop. So Vineeta, what was your, you were kind of pushed to do it, it sounds like. So what was your, once you, kind of were pushed and like, okay, I
Right.
think I can do this. I'm gonna do it. What was your plan to prepare for that exam?
That's a great question, John. So when I first started, preparing for my BCOP, I mean, this was even before, I said yes to the clinical job. I sort of went through the ACCP, ASHP videos because that was recommended to me by my colleagues. So when I started listening to those, I found that oncology is a totally different language. It's a new language. So around that time, I was also on LinkedIn, and I happened to notice Kelly Karlstrom's post on how she was going to go with ELO. So I just jumped on that offer. So I was part of her first cohort of students. And so the way that she described her course would be like was exactly what I was looking for. So I decided that even before I start watching the ASHP, ACCP videos, I needed to get some more basic information about the different types of cancers and the medications that I used before I could go into something more high level. So that's how I signed up for ELO, and the rest is history.
Okay.
She was amazing, and her program was just really helpful.
Well, this is a good time to mention that this episode is sponsored by the ELO Enjoy Learning Oncology Collaborative, which is designed for pharmacists working in oncology, especially those without formal residency training, who feel like they've been thrown into the deep end without support. It includes a comprehensive curriculum with 24 courses covering all the major cancers that are updated regularly, live monthly case calls where pharmacists learn directly from experts, a supportive community of pharmacists. And if you're interested in this, look in the show notes. There'll be a link for OncoPharm listeners. And if you're interested in ELO, clicking that link does help provide some support for our little podcast here. So Sheila, that was like the second ad read in OncoPharm history you guys just saw. So Sheila, what was your approach to getting ready for the BCOP exam?
Well, I just started doing research. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I graduated, I'm class of 98, the last of the RPHs. I knew that the paradigm had changed. And so when I was looking through the different prep courses that were available, ELO seemed very attractive to me because of the BCO guarantee up to 3 attempts. Uh, Having been out of school for so long and not having any idea how to study for this, it was a brand new world, a completely different language.
Well, hold on, Sheila. What do you mean by that? Guarantee for 3 attempts?
So with the ELO program, you have access to the curated material, you have access to the experts, the question banks, the monthly Q&As and discussions, up to 3 attempts at the BCOP. So if you take it and God forbid you don't pass, you maintain access to all of this curated material for 2 more
Gotcha.
attempts.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that really appealed to me. And once I reached out to Kelly, and she spent about 2 hours talking to me about her program and what she does for pharmacists and just her enthusiasm for the subject and her baby, her program, I was sold, and I'm really, really glad I did. I mean, just I can't say enough about the ELO program. I've seen other programs, I'm not going to name them, but I've seen material from other programs, and they're, from our study groups, because different people came with different material, and it was way too dense. There was no guidance, there was no sense of direction. It was just this avalanche of material. You didn't really know how to navigate. With ELO, everything is curated for you. It's literally telling you what you should be studying daily. And if you follow it, you will have success. And that's what happened. But on top of that, it was just the supportive community. The what you see in Kelly on the initial conversation is what you're going to get throughout. And just the people in the program, like the other people studying for the BCOP, we would form little groups and become study buddies. And now some of them are like lifelong friends. And the experts, some of them, the in-house ones, it was like 3 or 4 of them, outside of that monthly discussion on 3 malignancies, these in-house experts were available to you at any time. You just post something in the forum and they would respond. It was amazing. So yeah.
So, you mentioned some of the other ones, and Vineetha mentioned the ACCP, ASHP BCOP review course, which I'm a faculty for, and that's what I studied at a residency, and that kind of seems like what the target audience is, as folks who, after you do a PGY2 in oncology pharmacy, after that you can sit for the license, and it really does seem to be geared towards that. And as a faculty member, one of the hardest things to do is you are talking to 2 different audiences. You're talking to an
Right.
audience of people trying to get BCOP for the first time, and there's a lot of introductory stuff about the disease state and about the history of the disease state that you kind of want to go over. And there's folks that are getting their recertification and their recertification hours, and you're like, you know, I, it's very different audiences, and it's hard to meet both needs. And so a lot of times you have to kind of go down the middle, and you get some of this for the folks trying to take the exam for the first time, but not all of it, and some of what the recertification folks need, but not all of it. So it's a little bit of a mishmash. Have either of you looked at HOPA's BCOP review stuff? I know they have BCOP review course as well. I
I
don't
have not.
I don't see nodding. I know, and ASHP they've had it in the past, and they have brought it back now, an oncology certificate program as well, and HOPA has a core competency. So there are some other things out there as well, but they're like the certificate program and the HOPA core competency is like modules that you do online that you pay for. You don't have access to a community or anything like
Right. I
that.
haven't looked into that. But yes, like you said, after I finished the ELO program, though, after I went through all the disease states with Kelly, it took about 6 to 7 months. And my confidence just increased, and so did my understanding of the subject as well. So later I went back and listened to the ACCP and the ASHP material, and things started clicking. So I did listen to it eventually, but just as that beginner, I needed a little more basic information before jump starting on the ASHP material.
I mean, what you said earlier is exactly right. It's exactly what I say this to students. I've probably said this on the podcast before about it being a different language. And I remember as a precocious senior in high school, I was like, I'm going to read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And it is, it's Russian, classic Russian literature. And the translation from Russian to English is, they're very different languages. And as
Right.
I'm reading the book, I read like the first 100 pages and we go on vacation for a while. I don't remember. I come back. I haven't read it in a while, and I pick it up again. I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are because I don't know what their names are. There's like 17 consonants in a row. I don't know what this person's name is, and I didn't know the language anymore. And I was like, and I gave up at that point on on reading it because I didn't understand the language. And that's what I say to students is when you're first learning this, it's going to sound like a different language. And I think I'm a pretty decent educator. And I forget sometimes that to them, all they hear is blah, 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 mab and blah, 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 nib. That's all that they hear. And I hear EGFR antagonist. I hear PD-1 monoclonal. I mean, the way that my brain kind of works. So getting a good foundation on the basics is going to be really helpful before you to move on to some some more foreign language stuff. Um, let me transition and ask you guys, some of the stuff that you get in residency training, a lot of is you're working and going on rounds with physicians. You're learning from excellent physicians. You have other learners, other residents with you. You're bonding with medical residents and things like that. You kind of get to see what physician training is like, and you get some
Right.
confidence in like what they really know well and what maybe they don't always know as well. And so, not going that route, I'm wondering what were some of the challenges that you had going into oncology once you get to the specialist role, where part of your job is to tell an oncologist, hey, I understand what you're thinking here. This is why that's not the best thing for this patient. So, like Sheila, what was some of the hardest challenges you had, coming in that specialist role?
I think confidence is huge when you're speaking to these lettered people who are in this very specialized field. So I think my biggest thing was confidence and just wanting to double and triple check everything before I even opened my mouth. Uh, that was a big deal. I also felt like as I became more immersed in the world of oncology, so once I became a member of PNT and then the chemo council, and then once I started attending tumor board, just having that additional access and to the way that the leadership or oncologists think, I think all of that started to help me gain some more confidence in the field. And then as time went on, I became more comfortable speaking up and saying, well, doc, did you think about this? But it was just immersing myself in that world and just taking that first step.
What about you, Vineeta?
Yes, it was extremely daunting in the beginning, working as part of a multidisciplinary team because up until that point, I had always worked inside a pharmacy. Um, but I wanted to do this. So it was, even though it was quite scary, I started enjoying it. Whenever a physician or an APP, would ask me a question, I'll be like, I did not always know the answers, but I told them, hey, let me look it up. Let me double check and I'll get back to you. And they were, for the most part, okay with all of that. So I didn't, fortunately, I didn't have any, issues or any trouble as I got embedded into the clinic. But once you start, as time goes by, like Sheila said, your confidence increases, and you're also able to gain the trust of the providers with time. And so when you're in a clinic 8 hours a day, day after day after day, you will learn. And yeah, there's no other better way of learning than just being on the job.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it sounds like you both have had some supportive managers and leaders in your time. That's a hard, when you're a new clinician and you're trying to get a job that you want, it can be hard early on in your career to identify who are going to be the bosses who are going to be helpful to me in my career. Do you guys have any advice, being in this game for a while, of how, Sheila, how would you tell someone to look for that? You've got two jobs and on paper they're kind of the same. What are the attributes that you'd be looking for in a manager?
Someone who's open to questions because I'm known for asking a lot of them. Someone who is giving of their time and of their expertise, maybe their background. If they are a PGY2, they may not be so willing to impart information. I mean, my director wasn't, so he was much more willing to share knowledge with me because he didn't come from that world. So I don't know if someone who is a PGY2 in a leadership role would have taken me under their wing the way that my director, who wasn't a PGY um, graduate, did. So I think just gauging them out, seeing how they deal with questions, how patient they are with giving information, all of that would lead me towards how open they are to, like, if I say, like, would it be okay if I wanted to join this group or that group or PNT here or tumor board? Would that be something that you would encourage? And if I didn't get that vibe, then that's probably not someplace I would go.
Yeah, Vineetha, you mentioned, explicitly that you had a clinical manager, I think it was, who kind of pushed you along this line. Would you agree with that, or did this person have those same attributes that Sheila just described?
Absolutely. She was PGY too, but to my surprise, I found that she told me that having a PGY2 oncology residency is not the only route to getting a clinical pharmacist job. So that was really encouraging to me. And she was always open-minded, because she always kept asking me, what she can do to help me grow in my career. So I think that's one of the critical questions that you need to ask a manager is, what are the ways? Are there ways for me to grow in this job? Because I've also, had experience with managers who sometimes want you to be tethered to a certain role and, might not be as supportive for you to grow as a pharmacist. So my managers, all of them were super supportive and they were not judgmental at all. So whenever I had questions, I would sort of ask them questions all the time. And I could see that they were really interested in teaching me. They wanted to see me grow. So there was never any judgment. So, that also helped me be more comfortable in asking questions over and over again. So they always encouraged questions.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. One of the yeah, I think if you're listening to this and you're like, I think maybe I want to be an oncology pharmacist, I'm not sure. Um, you can find a job. It's hard to keep people in these positions because there are more oncology pharmacist positions every year, and a lot of folks are leaving practice to go to industry. They're getting burned out. The hours are too long, things like that. And I think at least part of that has to be how hard it is not just to get up to speed on everything going on and all these cancers and all these drugs, but how to stay up to speed with all the changes that come out. So, Vineetha, what's your practice for trying to stay current on all the changes that come out all the time?
So, Oncofarm podcast is definitely one of my resources. I listen to you all the time. Super helpful. Also at Texas Oncology, we have a lot of educational meetings that are sponsored, and I listen to all of those. Ask for updates, things like that. So when I was in clinic, obviously my physician himself would come. Every time there is a new update, something gets approved, I would be the first to know from the physician. But yeah, these are some of the ways I
Yeah.
stay up to date.
What about you, Sheila?
I try to stay in BCOP ready mode, not as crazy, but I definitely try to devote at least 1 hour a day to some form of oncology, whether it's journals or literature or an email I receive, so hope open forum, listen to a podcast, yours, and also I really love Tuonk Docs. They're really good, but I tell everyone it's just the beginning when you get the certification because it never stops. It's just so much information. And if you want to stay on top of it, you're always studying.
Yeah, I think this is another um, one of my isms, a thing I routinely say to students is I'll say it's if you run a mile every day for a month, you will have run 30 miles. And that will be easier than running one marathon in a month where you run 26 miles. It's a lot harder to try to do a whole bunch of it all at once than doing a little bit continuously. And that's kind of my approach too, is I try to stay um, at least a very superficial understanding of what's coming out, right? So like, oh, well, there was a new drug for this type of disease state, and if I have time, I'll do a deep dive on it. But at least I know it's there. And
Right.
the next time I have a patient where it's going to come up, I'll do the deep dive. Or if I need a podcast episode, I'll do a deep dive before the podcast and then put it out into the world. So Sheila, as we kind of wrap up here, I've got probably 8 or 9 P1s who in their like tell us what you want to do in your career were like at least oncology curious, if not really, wanting to do oncology. And when I talk to some of these students, they're like, I know I want to do a PGY2, I want to be a specialist, and some are like, I want to work in oncology pharmacy, but I'm from a small town and I don't want to leave my small area. And that means, not pursuing, a PGY2, maybe not even a PGY1. So what would your advice be to someone who knows they want to do oncology pharmacy, but they're really not thinking about residency training?
I'd say go for it. I do not have a PGY1 or PGY2, and it didn't it wasn't easy, but if it's something that you have an interest in, then I would say do a rotation, see how you feel about it, maybe an internship and see spend a certain amount of time in an oncology setting. And then if you feel like this is your calling, I say go for it. And it's not going to be easy and you might fall, but you just get back up and it's going to be overwhelming, it's going to be frustrating, but go for it. I say just go for it.
Okay, Vineeta, what would you tell them?
I would say PGY1 and PGY2 residency is not the only route to oncology pharmacy. So if you have any interest in oncology, and this is such a fulfilling area, to be part of the journey of these patients who've been diagnosed with cancer and to do everything that you can to help them, to support them throughout their journey. I feel like this is the most fulfilling specialization in pharmacy. And you can absolutely do it without a residency. Like Sheila said, it will not be easy. The journey will be difficult, but there are resources out there to help you. So it is possible, not easy, but possible.
Yeah, and I think you both kind of have, we didn't know each other beforehand, before this, Kelly kind of set us up. But you both worked as hospital pharmacists. And one of the things, when you're working as a hospital pharmacist, I remember as a resident, and I would work, you know, my weekends or my weeknights in the pharmacy, there are things you come across that you've never heard of on a regular basis in a hospital. And what you develop in that is a how to figure it out attitude and a how to figure out skill set, which you have to
Exactly.
have in oncology that maybe you don't develop if you're working in a community pharmacy, where that happens sometimes, but there's a reason there's a fast mover shelf in the retail pharmacy or community pharmacy, because that augmentin is flying out the door and that lisinopril is flying out the door, right? But
Yeah.
you're going to get drugs sometimes in a hospital pharmacy you've never heard of. And you're going to get that in oncology pharmacy too. So Sheila, before we wrap up, you mentioned you asked lots of questions. So do you have any questions you want to ask before we finish?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot now. A question for you, John?
Oh no, or Venita.
Um, well, I'll ask this. If you could do it over, would you have still gone for residency,
Yeah,
knowing you know right now?
yeah. I met my wife during residency. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I have to say that. I don't think she listens, but she might be outside the door. But yeah, I would. I may. It was a lot of fun, and I learned a ton from rounding with the physicians about the disease states. And you learn all real fast, and it was a lot. It was for the most part a really good experience. But it is a lot, and it did require moving away, from my family. I grew up in Indiana. I did residency in Charleston, and then met a Southern girl and have settled in the South. So I don't see, my family as often as I used to, or the guys that stood up at my wedding and friends from back home. Don't get to see my sister and her kids as often as I would like. So there are trade-offs to doing that. You don't know where it's going to go, and I've seen students who say the thing I said earlier is like, I want to be an oncology pharmacist, but I don't want to leave my small rural area where I grew up. Maybe I could move to Knoxville, they might say. Um, and and even those that think that, sometimes they fall in love with oncology so much they go do that PGY2, and then they sometimes they don't want to take a position that is at a smaller
Yeah.
cancer center, because they want to
Mhm.
work with the best doctors and they're trained and they want to go on and do some of that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, I would do it again. I really enjoyed my residency days, which is not true for everyone. There are certain programs that are, you know, not as not as
Mhm.
not as into professional development and wellness as others, but
I've heard.
yes, yeah, yeah. There are some with some not so great reputations. And it's also I don't know that the residency programs have caught up to the reality that every year you do a PGY2, it's harder than it was the year before
Mm,
because there's more drugs. There
right.
there are more cancers. Like we think of non-small cell lung cancer as not one disease state anymore. We think of it as multiple subtypes, and that's going to
Mm,
continue to develop. And at some point, we kind of as an oncology pharmacy community have to talk about what is the expectation we have once you finish your PharmD, because a lot of programs are cutting how much oncology they talk about because it is so complex. It's hard to figure out what do we even talk about if we can't talk about how to treat one cancer in whole, which is true,
Yeah.
which is
right.
true. But that's a different episode. I should say. Well, thank you, Sheila Pierre and Vineetha Thomas. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, taking some time out of your evening and telling your story. I kind of have a little synopsis for each of these episodes, and for this one, it's the dandelion effect because you both were kind of dandelions floating in the air. You didn't plan to be an oncology pharmacist, but you were floating along. You had some help along the way. You sprouted. You did the good work. You did hard work, and now you've blossomed. And now hopefully people who listen to this podcast will be their own dandelions and go somewhere else and become oncology pharmacists.
Awesome.
I
Thank you
like
so
that.
much for having us on
Ah,
the show.
thank you all. You guys have a good night.
You
Thank you.
too.
You
Thank you so
too.
much.